Good afternoon and welcome to one more webinar from Progress India. We do these webinars almost every Thursday, second, third and fourth Thursday of every month, and we do it from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. India Standard Time. We have friends joining us from Singapore, Hong Kong, so we change the time to 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. So today we're going to be talking about one of the coolest technologies out there, how to build a modern cross-platform native mobile application using Xamarin Forms and Telerik UI. So yes, this webinar is being recorded. It will be available on YouTube, not shortly. This is a standard deck that we have, but most probably we will make it live tomorrow or at the max Monday. So don't worry if you have to leave in between. We understand it's a daytime, lunchtime, so we are in between your lunch. So we will be recording this webinar and it will be made available at telerikhelper.net. That's the website that you will need to go, and then we will have a recap blog post most probably by tomorrow or by max by Monday. So who are the voice behind the mic? Your host for today, it's Lohit. That's me. That's how I look, and I work as a technical evangelist with Telerik or Progress in India. And we have Nish Anil. Nish is a senior program manager. He works with Xamarin in Microsoft, and that's his Twitter handle and my Twitter handle too. So without much further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Nish for introduction of what is Xamarin and what is Xamarin Forms. Nish, over to you. Let me make you the presenter.
Thanks, Lohit. Quick correction there on my Twitter handle. It's Nish Anil. Apparently, I would love to have a Twitter handle with Nish,
yeah.
But unfortunately, they never had. Somebody has already taken it, so.
We can see.
All right, so can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, so before I start, quick introduction. So I've been working with Xamarin for the past 3 years, and we got acquired a couple of months ago, and now part of the Xamarin team at Microsoft. So if you have feedbacks on Xamarin, you have some feature requests, feel free to share it with me, and I will be happy to take it back to the product team and get that worked out. All right, so Xamarin is, most of you would have heard about Xamarin as building native iOS, Android, Mac, and Windows apps in C#. But it's a little more than that. It's a complete mobile solution. So we are definitely going to talk about the development of these applications, which is iOS, Android, and Mac, in a while. But what I want to briefly cover today is also the complete mobile lifecycle. Testing on mobile testing your mobile apps is harder. It's really hard when it comes to your apps being tested on different devices. Just take an example, like that there are Android devices and there are like hundreds and thousands of different devices, and each manufacturer, they have different sizes of devices. Now when you build apps, you have to test them all. You cannot be under an assumption that the app that you build, and if it works on an emulator or your device that's within in your development environment, is going to just work well on other stuffs. That never happens. So you need to test it on real devices to make sure that your apps are working perfectly fine for your customers. That's why we built something called as Xamarin UI Test as well as Test Cloud. Now Test Cloud is, you can imagine a cloud with a number of devices out there. So you can write a test script using Xamarin UI Test, which is a pure C# test scripts, upload your app along with your test script cloud and test on the number of devices that you can choose from the dashboard. So that's Xamarin UI Test and Test Cloud. Now once you do that, you obviously, it's not that you're going to develop everything on your IDE and then, you're going to build and you're going to package it and you're going to ship it to your customers or your Play Store, right? Instead, you need some kind of a CI and CD to this continuous integration. Now, one of the big advantages that came up, part of our partnership and acquisition, in fact, Microsoft acquired us. So part of that is the VSTS integration, which becomes extremely easy and smooth. So now you can, directly integrate with your VSTS, online and, build your Android apps or iOS apps on VSTS online. And also, you might have heard that, Microsoft acquired another company called Hockey App about a year ago. So you can, which helps you distribute your applications. Now, many times before your applications reach your, store, you might want, some of your alpha testers and beta testers to test them out before it reaches your end customers. So Hockey App lets you do that. It's kind of like a private store, or it's kind of a app store for testers, so you can ship it to that, and there is a direct integration from VSTS to directly ship the app that was built using Xamarin, tested using Test Cloud, and then directly ship it to the app store, which is the Hockey app, right? And finally, you will also have to monitor your application, because there are many times you ship your app, and then finally you get your customers talking, hey, it's not working here. There's some feature that's been not exactly what I really was looking for, and other things. So how do you really track these things? So by integrating a few lines of code into your application, you can track the entire application, how exactly your application behaves. For example, if there is a crash, sometimes you've tested your application really well on a stable network, but somewhere in the 2G or a feeble network, your app is really failing. And how do you get to know that? And these things can be tracked by this monitoring aspect of the application. So this monitoring aspect was part of the Xamarin Insights earlier. Now it has been integrated right inside Hockey app, because that would make more sense, because place where you distribute, you just need a single dashboard to find out how your apps are doing. All right, so with that, let's get much deeper into developing of applications. Well, Xamarin has a unique approach to mobile development. I mean, you would have heard about a lot of different approaches out there. There is an approach where you will use Objective-C or Swift to build an iOS application. You might use an Android application is built using, let's say, Java on an Eclipse or an Android Studio. Now, if you're building a Windows application, you have Visual Studio, and you'll use a language like build it. Now, there is so much of fragmentation there itself. A single developer cannot develop all the three applications. Now, there are in the industry, there are like other solutions like a hybrid approach, where you have a HTML-based solution, which is the JavaScript and HTML put into the browser in front of the user with 100% height and 100% width, and your apps are going to perform inside that, right? Now, Xamarin has a very, very different approach. It is not a hybrid solution, first thing. It is not a HTML. It is not a JavaScript-based solution. It is a solution where you get to share your number of C# code. Those are business logic and the UI logic shared across all the three platforms, but you can build your UI completely natively. When I say natively, if you were to build an application using Objective-C or Swift, your native UI would be on Storyboard. And if you are building a native application for Android in Java, your native UI is going to be on XML. This is exactly what you would do even when you work with Xamarin. So you have the iOS UI written in Storyboard, and you will be wiring up the code in C#. You'll be writing the Android UI in XML, but you will be wiring up the code in C#. And since you're writing in a single language, as a developer, you have the advantage of working in all, you get to work on all these platforms without really worrying about the tooling support, because we have support for Visual Studio. We also have support for Xamarin Studio, so you can use any IDE of your choice, and you can build application for all these three platforms very easily. So we'll look at it in much more detail today. So that's the traditional approach that I talked about, where you build the UI in respective platforms. That's because you have a native approach to it, and everything that you build as a UI as well as any native platform features is basically using the SDKs that Apple or the Android provides you with. So if in case of an Apple, you will be using UIKit. In Android, you will be using views and other XML files to build the UI. Now, there are many times you may not require the complexity that these UIs brings in the traditional approach. So we built Xamarin Forms. So understand this in this way. Xamarin Forms is basically a UI layer on top of the existing platform, so which helps you share even more code. That means in the traditional approach, you could kind of share between 60 to 70% of the code, but with the Xamarin Forms approach, now you can share a lot more code. That's because even the UI is shared across. Now again, I just want to reiterate this point that we are not HTML and JavaScript. So the UI that you would be writing, it has to be in C#, which will boil down into respective native UIs in iOS, Android, or Windows. Now there are multiple ways to write this UI. You can either write the UI in C# completely, or we also support XAML, which we believe that all the .NET developers out there are much more comfortable building UIs in XAML-like language, because it supports MVVM, gives you a better code separation and all those things, which is a lot more cooler as well. So in the end, as a .NET developer, this is the kind of ecosystem that we can target. As a C# developer, I get to target every single device, and I can target the Azure, I can target the Linux, everything possible, and also share a lot of code across all these three platforms. So sometimes when you build applications, I mean, applications cannot be standalone, right? It has to connect to a backend, it has to connect to some kind of a server behind the scenes. So there are times when you want to share the code even to those servers. Now that's possible because you're writing in a single language. So as long as you have learned to architect this application in such a way that the native features remain in the native platform and there is your business logic that can be shared across, as long as you architect well, you can take it to every single device out there, including the cloud. So the good things, part of the acquisition, Xamarin is now included in Visual Studio. So if you have an MSDN subscription, you don't pay anything additional. Also, if you are building your own projects, feel free to use Xamarin Visual Studio Community Edition. Xamarin is free over there as well, and it's absolutely no restrictions there as such. And it's also completely open source. We totally believe in open source, so now you know that even the .NET is open source, the Rosaline is open source, everything out here is open source. So whatever I say here today, you feel free to go back and check the source code and see if we are really talking about the same thing. Cause some people say, like, how can this be native? How is that possible and other things? Yeah, well, there is source code out there. Feel free to go and check how it all. So, and if you are interested in contributing, well, open.xamarin.com is the place. Go ahead, check out. There are guidelines on how you can contribute back to the community, and the entire .NET community is available there for you to help, to get help from, and all those things. So, feel free to go and check that out. What is included as part of open source? Well, these are the ones. There's Xamarin iOS, which is the iOS SDKs for C#, and there is Mac and Android Forms, which is the respective SDKs on the platform. And also the bindings and plugins are also open source, so feel free to use them, or if you want to contribute to a plugin, you can do that too. It's I'll talk about plugins a little more when I talk about Xamarin Forms demo. So yeah, feel free to contribute there. Eventually, if you're writing in C#, your C# code can run on 2.6 billion devices, and these are devices alone, but you can share the code across all the cloud platforms as well. Now let's go a little deeper into how Xamarin works. Imagine if you're a .NET developer, and if you're an ASP.NET developer, let's take an example, right? So you have access to these base class libraries, system.NET, system.io, and other things. And if you were asked to build a Windows Phone app or Windows application in general, what will happen to you is you will have to learn these new SDKs, this Microsoft Phone or Windows Storage, and the UI as well, right? So you will learn those SDKs and then build them. And you will use the same IDE like Visual Studio to do that. This is exactly what would happen if you were to build using Xamarin. You have the same base class libraries with you. You're free to use them, as well as you also have access to the new SDKs that are part of the iOS. So UIKit is used for building UI, MapKit for integrating maps, iBeacons, Bluetooth services, core graphics, all those things. You have SDKs access. So when I say this, it's 100% of the API access. So what we did is we projected the existing Apple platform, which is the iOS platform, up in C#. So you are technically using the same SDKs what Apple provides. So plus, you also have access to the base class library, so you can use system, say, link feature or C# 6 features. You're free to use all those things along with the APIs that is provided by the platform. The same goes with Android. you have full access to the Android SDKs as well. Now there are sometimes you are programming an application for Android and you want to program something on NFC. Well, you have the access to NFC there. And if you're doing something on iOS and you want to do something with Core Beacon, Core Bluetooth, you're free to use that too. So you have the complete access for all the platforms, which is great. So anything that you can do in Objective-C, Swift or Java, you can do it in C# and Visual Studio with Xamarin. This is not technically a statement that we tell to impress you, but this is a true statement. Feel free to go to the open source web and just see how exactly we do this. Well, getting your native performance, how exactly does this whole thing work? You would know that a .NET, a C# compiles to IL, and then there is a just-in-time compiler picks up and recompiles natively for your application to run. Now, for whatsoever reason, Apple does not allow you to compile code at runtime, so we couldn't have the just-in-time logic there. So we use the ahead-of-time logic, ahead-of-time compilation of your application directly, so that you get a complete native app on the iOS platform. Now, when we do that, what we do is we use the LLVM compiler that iOS uses, which is, once you compile through that, you cannot technically differentiate between an app which was built using C# or Swift or Objective-C. So you get the same native performance and it's technically the same app. Also, we use something called as bindings. So just to give you an understanding what bindings is, if there are some Objective-C libraries, you can bring it to Xamarin. That's how we brought the entire SDKs into Xamarin. So we have binding is basically a layer that we write to bring the native SDKs into C#. So you can use bindings, and the bindings libraries are available for both iOS and Android. The way bindings works a little different between iOS and Android, because in Android we use the Java native method invocation, so you directly make calls to Java using C#. But in case of iOS, it's directly the C calls. Now, when it comes to Android, you have similar technology, but we also have the just-in-time compiler there. So mono runtime will run and kick in your code and run it to get you that same native performance. Always up to date. If you look at, we have support till iOS 9, the latest version, as well as there are beta versions available. iOS 10 is supported, Android Nougat is supported, so everything is out there. The history has been we kind of provide the same day support, like when Apple announces, let's say in the morning 11 a.m. PST, by 5 p.m. we announce the support. So what we eventually do is we kind of create the bindings for it, and when iOS releases its new release in the alpha stage, we also release our bindings for it at that time, around the same period. And when they go release, we kind of do complete regression, and we are also up to date. So that's the speed at which we work as well. And the another good thing is that when you're building native application, it's not just the mobile apps anymore, right? Your apps can run on multiple devices. Like for example, there's Apple Watch, there is Apple TV, Android Wear, Google Glass, and I have an Android TV at home, and I wrote my first app using C#, and I was so happy to see that come alive, which I wouldn't have imagined it in the past. That would have been really difficult, right? So this is all possible because it's all native, so you can use C# to build all these applications for all these various devices and platforms. All right, so today's focus is going to be completely on Xamarin Forms. So Xamarin Forms is basically a UI layer, as I mentioned before. It can be used to build very quick UI for your application, and it is also very powerful because it is native. It's totally native. So you can write it in XAML. It's one of the big examples that I can give you is the Xamarin Evolve conference app that we wrote a few months ago for our conference. It was used by various thousands of people who came to the conference. They were using this app and getting their ways out at the conference. So what I really wanted to say here is it's not something that you can just say that it's not right for a production app. It's totally untrue. Xamarin Forms is very much ready, and it is you can use that for your production apps. But only thing that I have a suggestion here is that do not use it if you have overly complexifying UI requirements, or if you have native features that you're literally using a lot. Then the Xamarin Forms will be less helpful there for you, because the idea of having Xamarin Forms is you get to share more code. So as long as you are meeting that, feel free to use this, and it is all production ready, and we have our own apps which are production. It's available on the App Store. You can download and see how exactly they perform and other things. Right, so I talked about this, what a Xamarin traditional approach can do, and I talked about the Xamarin Forms. It's the shared UI code. So when I talk about shared UI code, what you need to understand is the UI is something that you will program against the Xamarin Forms API. So we have about 40 plus pages, layouts, and controls baked in, so you can decide to use a code behind, or you can feel free to use a XAML. I mean, if you're a comfortable XAML guy, you can just use those XAML skills and MVVM skills to bring it to life. One more point that I want to be very, very clear about over here is the XAML out here is not the same XAML that you would expect in Windows Phone or Windows. Well, XAML is a language, right? But in Windows and Windows Phone, you would be working against Windows APIs. But in Xamarin Forms, you will be working against a Xamarin Forms API. So you cannot technically share a XAML code that was already built, but you're free. You're free to use the view models that you already been built. That can be done, but you'll have to write the UI again in the Xamarin Forms layer. We have support for two-way data binding as well, so that's the MVVM prime important feature to be in. We support navigations, animation API, and dependency service and messaging center, which is like basic requirements of any frameworks. Well, these are the pages available. So you can start with a content page, a navigation page, a master detail page. It's up to you depending on what is your application demanding it to. And a page is your base class where your view comes in. So if it's a iOS, it becomes a UI view, and if it's an Android, it becomes a view, and it places the appropriate XML files out there. Now, each page, you cannot directly place a control. I mean, you can only place one control if you wish to, but otherwise, if you want to have multiple controls, you'll have to use layouts. So you have some basic layouts like stack layout, absolute layout, relative layout, and grid. And grid is my favorite layout because it uses the same WPF gridding structure. So you can define your columns using grid.column definitions, grid.row definitions to write your rows, and then you can place your controls, to appropriate places. So it's pretty easy. These are the controls that come into line right now. You have to understand how we build controls. We are looking at three systems here. There's an iOS, there's Android, there's Windows Phone, and in Windows Phone you have UWP, you have Windows Phone 8.1, then Windows Phone Tablet, right? So so we have to look at all these platforms and make sure we build controls in such a way that which is common to across all these three platforms. So that's why you have these controls, which is readily available for you to use it, but you are free to write your own control. You can write your own custom controls, provide appropriate renderers in each platform, and then bring your controls to life. And that's where like our partners like Telerik come into picture, where they built data visualization controls that you can easily integrate into your line of business application. So you can, I think Lohit is going to show you how exactly you would use the Telerik controls in Xamarin Forms. But if you're looking for some small controls that you want to quickly build, you can use the same way of building it, like using custom renderers and other things, and you can bring your controls to life. So giving you some example out here, so if you look at, there's a XAML on your right, which is a tab page, and it has two content pages. And the first content page is basically the profile, and within the profile page you can see that there's a stack layout and there is two text boxes and one button. You can notice that for text box we use a naming convention called entry, because that becomes easier for understanding. Entry is basically a text box, UI text box in case of an iOS, and text box and edit text in case of an Android, and text box in case of a Windows. So you use something like entry, and then there is a button, and you can see how exactly on the left you can see the the screenshots of each platform. Now, one thing to notice here is look at how the tabs were arranged. You just wrote a single line of code which is tab page, but on iOS the tabs are on the bottom because we use the existing tab control of the iOS, and that's the convention that's been used there. Your tabs are always on the bottom. And you look at the Android, the tabs are on the top. And if you look at the Windows, we do not have tabs on the older systems of Windows, so we use the pivot control there. So you can just swipe on both on Android and iOS. You can use the swipe gestures to go to different tabs, which is by default supported, but on iOS you need to tap on those tabs. So technically we're using the same controls. So that's the whole point. And also, if you notice, one more thing is we support data binding, so you can see those same binding architecture that you would generally use on WPF, Windows Phone, or WinRT UWP apps. So as I mentioned before, I mean, Xamarin Forms, you can extend Xamarin Forms, you can create custom views, you can use platform APIs via shared services, and you can easily migrate to the Xamarin platform existing. If you have any existing native stuff, so you can easily migrate. So let me quickly show you a demo of this, and then I will pass it over to Lohit for continuing with this Telerik.
Alright, so right now we are on Xamarin Studio on a Mac. To get started with Xamarin Forms, you can go File, New, Solution, and choose Xamarin Forms under the multi-platform template. You're free to build even the traditional application. You can use the iOS and Android apps and build it the traditional way. But today I'm focused on showing you how to build Xamarin Forms application. You can go next and choose an app name and provide the target platforms. If you were to build this on Windows, on Visual Studio, you have the option to even target other platforms like either UWP apps or Windows Phone 8.1 or Windows 8.1 apps. While choosing the strategy for code sharing, you can either choose a portable class library or a shared library. That choice is totally up to you. Now, to build a UI, you can either build totally in code or use XAML, which is an amazing technology to use for which is used to create user interface files. So you can choose that and click next, and you will have our solution open. I already have built this solution, so let me just show you quickly. So this is a weather application where there's a simple text box. You key in a city and then click on a weather, and it gives you the weather information of that city and also provides you with some forecasts. So we'll look at a demo in some time. Before that, I want you to notice the way the project structure is being created. So you have the native projects, that's Android, iOS, and UWP. These are traditional projects. And on top of that, you have a PCL where the entire Xamarin Forms UI logic has been wired up for you. Now you see this UWP app, which is a little bit grayed out. And the reason for that is you cannot build UWP apps on Mac. But the same solution can be opened on Windows in Visual Studio, and you will see this UWP app can be run there. Now let me go quickly and show you what exactly happens, how exactly Xamarin Forms gets wired up within your traditional app. If you go into the app delegate file, you can see there's forms.init and there is load application method. This is exactly where everything gets wired up. The magic of Xamarin Forms comes into picture. All that it does is it does all the bootstrapping for you and then tells that there is an app.cs file that the Xamarin Forms looks at and builds the UI from there on. Now, if you go into the app.cs file, which is inside the PCL, and it is totally shared code. If you go into the app.cs file, you have a main page that is set into a tab page, which is here. Now, in tab page, there are two children, which is the weather view and forecast view. Now, I mentioned earlier that you can either build the UI totally in code or wire up everything in XAML. You can see that two views, the weather view and forecast view, those are basically the XAML files. But in the app.cs, it's just wired up in the code. But choice is totally up to you how you want to build it. Now, let's go look at the services for a minute. Now, we need to get the weather information. So there are helper methods like the getWeather method, which uses the HTTP client, the very famous NuGet, which is available for you to download. And also, there is Newtonsoft JSON that has been used for deserializing the JSON data and mapping and unmapping to class objects. So it's a pretty neat library. So simple logic, it's from the Open Weather Map API. It goes and fetches the data into JSON format and converts it into the model classes. There is model classes out here. You can see that pretty much what the JSON data would look like. All right, so let's not go into these details right now. And let's quickly see the UI. First thing is the weather view. if you see, this is a XAML page. And within the XAML page, the first page, content over there is the content page. As I mentioned earlier, again, the page is the starting point. And within the page, the first thing that you need to do is lay out the files. So you have a stack layout, basically puts everything on a stack. Every control that you place it inside the stack layout. Very similar to stack panel that you would have already been using on WPF or Windows applications. So you have an entry, which is nothing but a text box. And it has been, you can see a nice, data binding options over here. Xamarin Forms supports data binding. So if you have view models already built in, you can reuse them totally here. But you cannot reuse the views that you would have already built on Windows or Windows Phone because the XAML, although it is same, the APIs that you're working against are totally different. You might be working with a Windows API in case of building a XAML for Windows Phone. But here you're working against Xamarin Forms, so which means you will be using Xamarin Forms API. So you have a couple of stack panels and you have a text box and other things. So let's do one thing. Let's quickly run this application. So I'm going to choose the iOS application and click on set as start project and start this on my iOS simulator. So there you go. My iOS simulator popped up and there is a weather application. Now you can say Lohit is in Mumbai, so let's see the weather information in Mumbai. So right now, as you'd have guessed, it just fetched the data from the weather map API. So you can see that it's 25.9 and with a moderate rain. And it's a tab page, so I can go into the forecast and see the forecast for the next few days in Mumbai. Now, let's open the Android emulator as well. So I already had deployed this app. Let's pick up that. It's in my weather app. You can see that it's basically the same XAML code, which is magically becoming a proper material design template into an Android platform. And in iOS, you can see that it's pure iOS UI. You see that tabs, the weather and forecast, which is totally below on iOS, and weather and forecast on Android, it's on the top. So let's do this again. So let me check the weather for Bangalore. And you can see this is 26 degrees Celsius today and the forecast for next few days. So it's pretty neat, pretty nice way to do things. Let's go look at the weather view model for a minute. So every view has been attached with a view model. So you have a weather view model and you have a method called execute weather command. It's again I command. If you are familiar with MVVM, you've been probably using this the I command interface and writing commands for it. So you have these properties and other things, everything which is bound into your XAML. And you have the execute weather command, which technically calls a weather service out there and gets the information. Now you can see one more thing is there is something called as use GPS. That's a toggle button. And when you do that, you can see the source code a little bit. You can see a cross geolocator.current.get position. Now as I mentioned before, in Xamarin Forms, you can use the native features. Like if you want to access the GPS of your native platform, either you can write a dependency service, write an interface, and then write implementation on respective native platforms, or you can use plugins. Now, plugins are provided by either some folks at Xamarin or by the community, and it's all open source. So what plugins does is basically it provides implementation for these native platforms, and it provides you some abstraction so that you can directly use it in the Xamarin Forms project, and appropriate reference into the native platforms will take care of calling in the code for example, calling in the GPS code for iOS or calling in the GPS code for Android is taken care for you, and it's abstracted away from you. So to use NuGet package, to use plugins, you can go and get the plugin from the NuGets. So you can see that there is a plugin called Xam plugin geolocator, which has been used. And within that, we're using this cross geolocator.current.geo get position async method. So now if you click on get GPS, you can see that that particular text box is grayed out and get weather. Technically, I'm in Bangalore, so it's trying to fetch the weather based on my location. So if you look at when I clicked on the weather, it immediately asks for the permission to access for the location. So I can decide to allow or deny. And all these things are taken care of right inside your a plugin, so you don't have to write this code. So I click on allow, and now it goes and gets the weather based on the GPS coordinates. Eventually, I should be getting the same weather, in fact, because, oh, that's broken. Let's see. Okay, it says Bangalore and say broken clouds, maybe some issue with the network. All right, so eventually, essentially it's going to work, yeah, it says Bangalore, but it does not get the weather information. Could be something to do with the service. All right, let's leave that. And also, the other thing is we can use something like cross text to speech. There's another plugin there. So I want to show you this, how it works. And let me run this on an iOS. So I just enabled text to speech plugin. So what it does is it kinds of reads out the weather information for you. And again, these are native features which are part of the iOS and Android platforms. We are using it in Xamarin Forms by the help of plugins. So let's look at this again. So I'm getting the weather information.
10, 25.92 degrees Celsius Mumbai, moderate rain.
And you can see that the text-to-speech plugin has invoked the native features and native SDKs to get this information. So that's a little bit brief about Xamarin Forms, and we can go into the details as much as you want, but I think now Lohit wants to cover most of the Telerik controls and components, so I will leave it to him.
I hope you guys are able to see my screen. So I'm going to be talking about, let's talk Telerik UI for Xamarin. So what Nish talked about was the context where you use Xamarin as the technology to create cross-platform mobile application, and then he showcased that you basically use XAML, you basically use the C# and then start doing stuff. And one of the things Xamarin has done is there is a UI layer where they have pretty much abstracted out, or they have given you a layer where for the text box, right? The text box on iOS is different, the text box on Android is different, but when you're programming with Xamarin Forms, you just go in and then say entry, or you just go in and say button. So the Xamarin Form layer knows about when I'm rendering on iOS, yeah, this is the button, or when I'm running on Android, oh yeah, this is the button. So they do the stuff for you, and you as a developer need not worry about those intrinsic things about the particular platform. All you worry about is, okay, in Xamarin Forms for a button, what do I use? Oh, it's button. For a text box entry, what do I use? Oh, it's entry. That's all you need to know. So where do we come in, right? So as a technology, Xamarin hasn't given you everything. Like, for example, there is no charting per se in the SDK that's available in Android or even in Xamarin, because Xamarin focuses on what's there in the core OS, or Xamarin focuses on what's there in the core SDK, and then they have abstracted those things in terms of the bindings. So where we come in as a company like Telerik is we complement that particular technology by bringing out certain controls. We manufacture those controls, or we develop those controls. We are the authors for those controls, and we call it as Telerik UI for Xamarin. So this is a enterprise product, or it's a licensed product. We don't have anything per se open source, whereas Xamarin is open source. If you have a Visual Studio Community Edition, you pretty much get Xamarin there. But when it comes to companies like Telerik, all other companies, well, we are here to make we have spent man hours building these controls, so that's why they're all charged or licensed, and you just buy them and then start using them in your applications. So what do we give you in terms of UI for Xamarin, right? So next slide is going to be basically the offering that we have from our side. So for Xamarin Forms, we give you a chart, list view, calendar, site drawer, and data form. So what are these? These are nothing but controls that are cross-platform. When you are developing a UI in Xamarin Forms, if you take our Xamarin Forms chart control, Telerik UI for Xamarin charts chart control, you just drop it on any particular XAML, and that's it. And then when you render it on iOS, or when you render it on Android, you're going to get the chart seamlessly, right? That's what it is all about. Similarly, the list view, our list view has certain additional properties or additional functionalities, like pull to refresh is easy, swipe is enabled on a particular item, you can have a selected template, you can have a press template. For example, the items go through a couple of life cycle. For example, one of them is the selected state, another one is the press state. When you're selecting, you got to first press the item. So I can allow you to create certain templates for all this stuff, and the calendar, and then site dryer. What Xamarin Forms does is, there is no per se there is no concept of a dryer, but rather the Xamarin Forms comes out and then says, like, if you ever have those kind of situation, use a master detail page, right? But what we did was, we said, okay, you know what, we're going to give you a component or a control called a site dryer. So it's pretty much dryer coming from the left. Not only that, we kind of go ahead, we notch up the one level up, and we give you like the transitions that you want to do, the revealing, factor. Do you want to slide in? Do you want to slide from top? But the location, where is the dryer, located, right? Is the left, the bottom, the top, the right. So we allow you the positioning of a site dryer. We allow you the transition of a site dryer and all those things. If you are developing Xamarin iOS or Xamarin Android, which is nothing but the native way of creating the cross-platform apps, meaning the UI is in native technologies. Like iOS, it's storyboard, Android, it's going to be AXML. So we have the native controls also for that. The Xamarin Forms is the way where you use the XAML. So we have the XAML version of those things also. So this is the UI for Xamarin Suite that we have. And this is how the chart control looks like. Basically we give you, or we fill up that gap where if you have a data visualization needs, there's nothing in Xamarin Forms because they wouldn't build that. So that's where we came in, and then we have built this particular chart types, 10 plus chart types, support for various axes. You can pan and zoom, the selections, the annotation, the tooltip visualization, you name it. There's a bunch of things available within the charts. We also have this list view where we call it as list view on steroids, pull to refresh, easy data binding, item reorder and swipe actions, selection animation, data virtualization, flexible layout. So we have built in the, we use the UI table view on the iOS, and then we use the recycler view on the Android. So you don't have to worry about that. You just use our list view, and then we make sure that we use the appropriate things on the appropriate platform. Then this is interesting stuff. If you want to ever build a forms quickly, well, this is what it is. So what we do is, you create your own POCO model, and then we map the object properties to the UI. If you have a public property called as name, and then it's a string, we're going to give you an entry automatically, right? Read only or editable elements, input editor to type matching. So basically I can say that, hey, for this, use this particular editor. Those kind of things. 3 commit modes, all those things are available. Built-in validation, that's the biggest thing. If you're creating a forms, we have validations out of the box. You can customize those validations, but otherwise, if you're straightforward using a string, we know, and if you make it it's a required, we will be making sure that user enters that before it goes out of the screen. So these kind of stuff are available, and this is the site dryer. Extends the popular slide out design. It's great for navigation and organization. So basically, if you want to provide navigation in the site dryer, yeah, that's when you use the site dryer. You can embed any content in the sliding panel. What you're seeing in the image is basically a list being embedded, but you can bring in any content onto that. You can also customize the effects and transition. That's what I was talking about. So we have 2 customization that we provide you on the site dryer, one being the position, another being the transition. So how do you want the site dryer to come up? Is it a slide in? Is it a reverse slide out? There's a bunch of transition that we provide. We also allow you to control from where do you want the site dryer to come up. Do you want it to come from the left, top, or a bottom, or a right? So we allow you the dryer location. We allow you the dryer transition, so all those things. And then, of course, this is another control we have, calendar, where we show week, month, year reviews, single, multiple, and range of date selections. We allow you to make use of the appointment feature, where we support for appointments. Localization is built in. If you, it's basically the culture aware, and of course, it's a flexible style API. If you want to kind of go ahead and then create your own styling on the calendar, you can do it. So now I'm running out of time, so I have only 5 minutes. So let me try to quickly build something within this 5 minutes, and then showcase what it takes to build Xamarin UI forms, but using Telerik UI. So in the interest of the time, I've already created a blank application, but I'm going to show you now how to start getting started. So before that, if you go to www.telerik.com, and here we are. This is telerik.com, so it's loading on your page now. Okay, there we go. So on the top there is a products drop down. If you click on that, we have a bunch of mobile solutions, right? If you see here, this is the section that's available for mobile mobility. We have our own cross-platform application technology or runtime, we call it. It's called as UI for NativeScript. And notice here we have UI for Xamarin, UI for UWP, UI for iOS, UI for Android, Windows Universal, and then Windows Phone. So when it comes to UI for Xamarin, that's where we support the Xamarin iOS or Xamarin Android or Xamarin Forms. As you can see here, chart, list view, site dryer, calendars, basically you can see all the controls as you can see here. Now how to get started with UI for Xamarin from Telerik? Well, just click on this try now button. So once you click on this try now button, what we do is we will give you 30 days of trial of our solution or our controls. It's going to be available to you on your machine. So let me show you where I have installed it. So I have installed this on my programs, Telerik, then UI for Xamarin. So currently we are running at R2 2016. So this is what you get. You get the binaries. We give you the Android binaries. For example, when you want to go Xamarin.Android way, you need these binaries. When you want to go Xamarin.iOS, you need these binaries. Windows Phone, WinRT, and Xamarin Forms. So we also have a separate binaries for Windows Forms. So here is the Xamarin.Forms, Android binaries, Xamarin.Forms, the common binaries that you need, like that. Now, once you have installed this, what we allow you to do is, I'm basically a Visual Studio fan, right? So if you are in Visual Studio, you know that this is the only one studio that you need to do anything .NET. Be it web, be it console, be it desktop, now mobility, right? Even in the Xamarin Forms. When I go and then do file new project, so let's give it a couple of seconds, and there we go. So I have the file new project dialog coming up. Notice here on the left hand side I have Visual C# node selected, and if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, depends on how many templates that you have, we have what we call as Telerik Xamarin Forms app template. So this is the quickest way to get started with UI for Xamarin from Telerik. So what this does is it creates a Xamarin Forms portable project, and then it's going to add up Android, it's going to add up iOS, it's going to add up Windows Phone projects, and set all the binary references out of the box for you. Otherwise you will have to manually bring in all those binaries that I showcased to you. So what we do is we just jumpstart your development if you use this particular thing. So let me go ahead and then say, like, yes, so create this particular project. So once I say that, here is a little project configuration wizard that we bring up. So there we go. So you see it on your screen now. What this does is it's asking me, hey, what all support do you need? Do you need Android support? Do you need iOS support? Do you need Windows Phone, Windows Store apps 8.1? Notice we still don't have Windows 10 UWP. We are still showcasing the Windows Phone 8.0, but rest assured my team or my engineering team is hard at work. We will make sure to bring in Windows 10 UWP soon. It's just not that it's not there in this release, but we will be coming out with that. So notice here we have all the typical Xamarin Forms setups that you need. What is the minimum API level you want to support? What's the target API level that you want to support? In iOS, do you want to create a dedicated iPad app or iPhone iPod app, or unified, meaning it's going to work on iPhone or iPad or iPod. So I've selected that, and just for the sake of the demo, I'm going to select this check boxes for Windows Phone and then Windows Store apps 8.1. Now I'm not going to go ahead and click on create because I already done that. So looks like Visual Studio, as soon as I selected it's closed my existing solution. So let me bring up my existing solution. There you go. So I've already created something called as Xamarin Forms demo app, and let me bring in the Solution Explorer to you, and let me zoom in a little bit. There we go. So this is what you get. So you get the Vinati project. Okay, Visual Studio is still loading for me. And we should be back in the Visual Studio. There we go. So this is the Windows RT version, that is, it has a Windows Phone, all those things. It's supporting the WinRT runtime. And here's the Xamarin Forms Android project and Xamarin Forms iOS project. And the portable, this is where the UI sharing happens. So basically you need the Android and you need the iOS project so that we can do the build or the package for that particular platform. And what we have in Xamarin Forms portable is the, it's a PCL, portable class library, where the UI also is going to go into. So as you can see here, as of now, not iOS. Okay, my Visual Studio is still not responding to me. Too many things running on my machine today. Go to meeting, the emulators, and the Visual Studio. So let's give it a moment for Visual Studio. And looks like I'm back. There we go. So this is the Xamarin Forms.portable. As you can see here, it's basically a PCL, portable class library, and then it's nothing new that we not know of. But what Xamarin Forms does is Xamarin Forms lets you start building your UI within your portable, and then it is stored. I mean, it is kind of used everywhere. Like, in the Xamarin Android or Xamarin iOS Forms .iOS that we have here, you just delegate it to the portable and say like, hey, you know what, in the portable class there is an application file. I want you to start that, and then application file will go and then start your first screen, whatever you have. In my case, I just have start page.xaml, right? So that's all we have done. So let's go back, and I'm going to dock to this right side here, and let's bring this guy. So let me show you what we have in the Xamarin portable class library here, and then the start page.xaml. So it's basically it's a simple content page, as Anish had already said. So now all I'm going to do is I'm using Visual Studio Android emulator. So I'm going to just run this on Visual Studio emulator. Nish showed on an iOS emulator, so that means Xamarin Forms running on iOS. Now I'm going to showcase basically as a scenario wherein I am running the same project maybe on an Android device. Like, so what I have is a Android emulator. That's the Visual Studio Android emulator, pretty fast. I'm happy that it started working for me. And what you're seeing in the background is actually I'm trying to deploy this onto this particular emulator. So it's the Visual Studio is doing all the build for me, and then it's going to now start pushing onto that. So we already at the 1 hour mark, but I just need another maybe 5-10 minutes to showcase a couple of stuff that we have, cool stuff that we have. So now, as you can see, deploy is succeeded. So we should see the app coming up on the emulator in any seconds. And it seems to be taking a little bit of time. And there we go. So I think we are now almost, yeah, it's launching on the emulator. It's going to be a blank, as I said. So if you see here, it just says Xam Forms demo. That's the title that I've given. And then if you see there's a label, and it says you are ready to use all controls from Telerik UI for Xamarin Forms Suite, right? So that's all pretty much what we have here. So what I'm going to do now is, in the interest of the time, I'm going to quickly go ahead and then build a new page. Let's say I'm going to say add new item. just to showcase, like, this is how you use, and then I will switch over to our canned demos that we have. So I'm going to say I want to build a cross-platform form XAML app. I'm going to call this as dryer.xaml, sorry, dryer.cs. So once I say this, I will get the a new XAML page. It's going to be a content page. So let's give it a couple of seconds. Looks like my system is running low on memory, so I'm going to, okay, this is fine. Oh, it docked onto my left hand side. Just give me a second. There we go. So this is the dryer.xaml that got created. And looks like my solution explorer is giving me hard time. Just give me a second. Yeah. Yeah, so here it is. Okay, so I'm able to dock it now to the right. So what you're seeing here is just a content page that we Nish had showcased. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go copy this content page that was created for me, and then I'm going to paste it. Now this is going to be dryer, and here I'm going to say this is a dryer demo, right? And then I'm going to just place a grid. So this is what Nish was talking about. It's all the same XAML terminologies that you use. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place toolbar item here. So why? Because I need the hamburger icon coming up on the screen to just to showcase that, yeah, this is where the button is going to be. So I've already set up the hamburger icon PNG in my project. So then in order to handle the toolbar button click, I am handling the toolbar button click. All I'm doing is the dryer open or not. So now I'm going to go ahead and notice here I've already included all the namespaces that is required, Telerik primitives, Telerik data controls, the chart, input, and all those things. I mean, I don't need a chart here because I'm not showing a chart, but just to showcase that this is how you use it. Next, what we do is we just go ahead and then create the XAML. Right, so there you go. So this is the Telerik primitive rat side dryer. I've given it a name of, dryer length is 250 device independent pixel. What is the transition type that I need? Well, I want it to be slide in on top. Well, I can go in and then say dryer location, and we provide you bottom, left, right, top. By default, it's going to be left. Then here is the interesting stuff, right? So you have two things in a dryer. One is the dryer content. What should I show in the dryer? And then you have the main content. Okay, what's the main content or the main page that needs to be shown? So in this case, in the interest of the time, I've just created simple stuff. I have a, I'm showcasing here another control from our side. So it's the list view. So I just place the list view here, and I'm going to bind the data from the code behind. And I just have an inbox here, a label here which says inbox. So now let's go back and then start some programming for this guy. So all we need is, we need a item source for, okay, I need to save the dryer.xaml. Yeah, now it's going to be happy. Now I'm going to set up a source for this. So what I've done is in the dryer, I have a list view, rad list view. And for the item source, I'm just creating a string array, inbox, drafts, and sent. Then I need to handle the item tap event, right? Oh, not here. So what I need to do is this dryer list item tapped. So we give you all these things. So I'm going to do a event handler here. I could have done an anonymous, not a problem. So all I'm going to do is when you click on a particular item in the dryer, I'm going to just show that in whatever label we had, I'm going to show that as what item did you click. And in a real world situation, what you will do is you will have bunch of screens or views in your project, and you're going to keep bringing one by one into the main content. So you can just say this .dryer.main content is equal to a content page. You can do that. Just for the demo, I'm just showcasing, like, this is how you navigate and all those things. And then I'm just saying dryer open is false, meaning close the dryer. Well, this is all it requires to create a dryer. Now, one other additional thing that I need to do, let's go to app.cs, and instead of the start page, I'm going to say, hey, I want you to show dryer. So let me deploy this onto the emulator. I know there are a bunch of questions on the Q&A panel, but just hold on for another 5 minutes or so, and then we'll be done with our demos, and then we'll get on to the Q&A. So builder started, and what it's going to do is it's going to deploy it onto the emulator, and then we should see the dryer demo page coming up. Initially, the main content is having a label, and it will have a text called as inbox, and then I will show you that there is a dryer coming up from the left hand side, and the dryer has the list view that we created. There we go. So we have the UI coming up any moment on your screens. And there we go. So we have a fantastically looking content page, and there's a hamburger icon on the right hand side, and then notice here the label says inbox. Now I'm going to click on the hamburger icon, and from the left hand side now you should see the dryer coming up, and I have styled the dryer to have a black background. You can do any styling that you want, it's up to you. So I'm going to click on inbox, and notice here it's going to say inbox. I'm going to click on drafts. Notice here the main content says drafts. I'm going to click on send. The main content says send. So this is just a quick example to let you know how easy it is to work with the rat side dryer. That is all you need to know. If anytime you need a dryer kind of a navigation, yeah, this is what you got to do. Just include the rat side dryer, have a list view, bring up your menu items, and then have your different views, and then at runtime instantiate the particular view, cache it, and whenever the user navigates from one page to another view, bring in the cached view, and then that's it. Set it to the main content, and you are done. So you will be able to pretty much get done with your stuff. So now quickly let's go and then build one more stuff, and that is the list view. So what I'm going to do is, it's already 1:12, so 12 minutes overboard, but I hope this thing is pretty interesting things that you're seeing. So you're going to stay with me for another couple of more minutes. So I'm going to say list view demo.cs, and let me go to start page, and then I'm going to just copy paste as is, and again I'm going to place a grid. Now what I'm going to do is, in the grid I'm going to go ahead and then paste the list view XAML. So there we go. So this is what you get. You get the Telerik RAD data controls :rad list view, name LV products. Then I need to set a style on that particular okay, I think I'm missing one of the, okay, we'll come back to this. And here's the template that you will do. Okay, I'm missing some things. Just give me a second. I have missed one namespace. Just give me a second. I'm just going to bring it up. Telerik and portable and list view. So these namespaces are, pretty hard to remember every time. So if you look at our documentation, we pretty much have it. There we go. So this word I was missing here. So I just need to come in here and then paste this guy. So these are nothing but bunch of namespaces that you need. So there we go. So now I can bring in my item style. So in the item style, all I'm saying is, hey, I want the border width to be 0, but I can go ahead and then do a bunch of things. I can set the background color. I can set the border color. I can set the border to be bottom, all those things. And let's take a look at the item template. It's as good as whatever you've been doing. I'm using a data template. There's a template cell.view, and then what am I doing? I just have a label, and then I just have this particular stack layout with, again, a couple of labels, right? So we also provide you this concept of selected item style, meaning if anytime any particular item is selected, this is what you want, this is what I want you to do. So set a background color to E5, ED, F3, and then border width is so and so, all those things. Maybe when somebody presses an item, you want to pretty much show some other color or some other border color, some other background color. Yeah, you can do that too. So this is the pressed item style that we do, and this is the item template. Now I'm going to go back to the code behind of this, and bunch of things that I would need to do first. One is I need a small list view demo. Yeah, so here I need to say portable.listViewDemo. So I'm creating a helper class or a model class called as item. It has name and value. Then I'm going to do a bunch of random numbers, so just to make sure I get a random stuff. Then I need to set a data source for the list view. So as you can see here, I'm saying LV products.item source is equal to get source. So here's the get source helper. All I'm doing is I'm looping through the count of whatever items that I need, and then I'm just doing a random generation of products, all those things. Now if I do run this, okay, we need to go and then change the app.cs. So we're gonna say list view demo, and now let's deploy this. So it's gonna just do a new build, and then since it's a new build, it's gonna do the APK, everything, and there we go. So, and it's gonna push it to the device or the emulator. Couple of seconds, and then we should see the app launching. With what it will have is now the list view demo page will be the first one to be shown, because I said navigate to that page. Well, what you could have done is, what I could have done is create the side drawer and then have all these different pages as the different options in the drawer, and then navigate to that. But in the interest of the time, I just wanted to showcase. There we go. So what I've done is I'm randomizing certain numbers, and then this is the what you get. So notice here when I select, I don't know if you're able to see the different color being done. So let me try to zoom in maybe. There we go. So this is having a different colors. And notice for a moment there is a orange border coming up. So that's the pressed style that we have, and this is the selected style that we have, and then the item style that you can see, right? Now let's see how easy it is to create pull to refresh, right? So let's assume you want to create a pull to refresh. So what I'm going to do is go to the here, and I'm going to say is pull to refresh enabled. That's it. It's a property, and I'm going to say true. Then what I need to do is that's it. So now we need to go back to the, and then we need to handle, we need to first set up the event that's products that refresh requests. So that's the event that we provide you, and then you just have to handle that particular event. And then what you will do is, here is the event handler. Oh, okay, so let me recreate the, what happened? Oh, I'm in dryer, so sorry about that. Not here. I need to be in the list view demo. So here I'm going to say lv products dot refresh requested, and I'm going to create a event handler. And what am I going to do in the event handler? Nothing. I'm just going to say, just to mimic that, hey, there is a delay happening. I'm going to just say task.delay for 2000 or 2 seconds. So I'm going to call this a sync, and then here's the await. And then notice here, all I'm doing is I'm just setting just the source again, and it's going to randomize and then get me the random data. And this is important. We got to call end refresh, meaning, yeah, I'm done with the refresh. Go ahead, stop the refreshing on the UI itself. So let me start now. Deploy now this to, this scenario can be as if like you are going to the internet, you have an endpoint, and then Nish was talking about going to the weather API, trying to get the data. Yeah, you can do that. Instead of task.delay for 2 seconds, you can actually do an await on a HTTP client call and let the data come back to you, and then you can say, yeah, I'm done, so end the refresh. So UI will know how to paint it back, all those things. So but from a perspective of usage, this is as simple as it can get. Just say is pull refresh enabled to true, handle the refreshed requested event, and in the refresh requested event, get the data, bind it to whatever things you have, and that's it. So now what I'm going to do is, let me zoom in. I'm going to just go to the top and then pull. Notice here what we have. We have a spinner coming up. It's going to mimic for 2 seconds it's spinning, and now notice the data came back with a different randomized data, right? Let me pull it back again. There we go. So it's now again gone ahead and then did a custom data. So we have completely ran out of time. So what I'm going to do is I will go ahead and then show you a application that I've already installed here. So let me see if I have it here. Okay, I don't have it in this one. So let me quickly bring it up. So I'm going to bring up my 6.0 emulator. So I have our, we have something called as SDK browser. So basically when you download Telerik UI for Xamarin, so we will give you the examples code here. So we call it as SDK browser. So as you can see here, Xamarin Forms SDK browser. And this solution contains all of our Xamarin Forms, a bunch of demos that are available, and you can always go back and then take a look at it. Notice here we have the SDK browser.portable, and then here's the example, here's the calendar examples, chart examples, a bunch of charts. So I want to actually show you charts, so give me a minute and we will just get to the charting. I'm assuming there are a bunch of questions available, so let's see. Okay, I'm running low on memory. Okay, let's run the 5-inch marshmallow. I know there are a bunch of questions, so please hang on to that. We will get to the Q&A in a moment. So here is the emulator, which is kind of launching now. So by the way, this is Visual Studio Emulator for Android. Any of you who are on Windows and then you want to do an Android emulation, the stock Android is a little slower. Genymotion is typically a problem because of Hyper-V. VirtualBox won't run correctly, so you cannot get the Genymotion running correctly. So what Microsoft did was they created this Visual Studio Emulator for Android, and it's super fast. I like the way this guy works, so it's easier to do stuff with this. I don't have to worry about the Hyper-V stuff. There you go. As you can see here now, the OS is booting, and it's going to be up in a couple of seconds. There we go. So we have the emulator booted up, and here is the SDK browser that I was talking about. So I just deployed that solution that I showed you onto this particular emulator, and then if I click on calendar, now you can see, how do you see the appointments. So there we go. So you can get into the month view, all those things. So there is the, how neatly it goes to month by month, and then there's a cell styling. As you can see here, today's date is styled differently compared to other dates. Let's go back to charting. So this is where I wanted to show. So we have the area series. There we go. So this is the area series. Here's bar horizontal and bar series. And then if I were to be on a Mac, I could have run it on a Mac iOS emulator or simulator that they have, and you would see the same chart coming up there. We have a bunch of charting capabilities available here: stacked area, spline area, selection series. Then we have the pie chart. There we go. So we have the pie. We have the trackball series. So meaning, when I do a, you will be able to see the trackballs coming up. This is about the chart. So the list view, right? So the swipe gesture. So this is another interesting thing I ran out of time of showing. So what I'm doing is I have a touch screen based laptop. It's a Lenovo Yoga. So I'm actually using my finger to swipe from right to left, and notice here now you get a button which says decrease, and I can click on it, the product decreased, and then now I can swipe from my left to right, and there is the increase button, and then I can do that. So like this, we give you a bunch of properties available. As you can see here, selection, you can do like, I want the selection mode to be multiple, so I can say okay, so I can do a, as you can see here now, I'm doing a multiple selection of the items, right? So this is where we come in. We add a lot of bunch of stuff to the controls. So this is the location thing that I was talking about. Let's say you want the dryer to coming up from the top. There we go. So you can get the dryer from the top. You want it from the right, you can get it from the right. You want it from the left, you will get it from the left, or maybe you want it from the bottom, right? Yeah, you can get the side dryer from the bottom. So that's kind of a relevant tour of what we have. So of course the data form, as you can see here, the styling is a bit odd because I didn't get time to style this. So I've given some color somewhere. As you can see here, it automatically has name should be longer than 2 symbols. That's because the out of the box we give you the validation. You can select all this stuff. You can do this way, publish, all those things, and then you can commit, and notice here it says there are some invalid fields, right? So that's what we give you in terms of the Xamarin Forms controls. This is going to grow as the day progresses. As of now, we have 5 controls that we enable, but maybe over the time, we will come back and then start putting it more. So that's all we had for the day. Nish, are you still there?
Yeah, yes, I am. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, so here are our coordinates. I'm available at @Kashyapas, and then Nish is available at @Nish Anil. If you have any questions on Xamarin Forms and then UI for Xamarin from Telerik, you can always tweet to us, and then we will be glad to help you out. We will be glad to work with you. We'll see how we can, take you to your next level in terms of the UI and all those things. So I take this opportunity to say thank you to Nish, because this has been cool doing the webinar together, and look forward to maybe jamming again with some other topics on Xamarin Forms or something like that. We'll see how it can go. But thank you, Nish, for taking time and then being here for our webinar.
No problem, Lohit, and it was a pleasure joining you. I hope we can do more webinars in the future together. Looking forward to that.
Cool. So I'm going to stop recording and get on to the Q&A now. So thank you very much to everybody who came over here for the webinar. I hope you guys learned something new, and we hope you're going to be there for our future webinars too. Thank you.